Long ago, in the ancient kingdom of Ile-Oluji, there lived a powerful Ifa priest named Babalawo Olokun. The villagers feared him more than they respected him. His eyes were dark like midnight, and when he walked through the market, people stepped aside quickly. Children hid behind their mothers' wrappers. Even the king consulted him before making important decisions. Babalawo Olokun knew secrets. Secrets about the past, secrets about the future, and dark secrets that should never be spoken aloud. He lived alone in a compound at the edge of the village, surrounded by clay pots, strange herbs, and objects that glowed faintly in the moonlight. But despite all his power and knowledge, one thing troubled his heart deeply. It was not gold he wanted. It was not more power. It was a woman. Her name was Omotola, and she was the most beautiful maiden in all the land. Every man who saw her fell silent with admiration. But Omotola belonged to someone else, Prince Aremu, the king's only son. Prince Aremu was everything a prince should be. He was brave, kind, and handsome. The villagers loved him because he treated everyone with respect, from the oldest elder to the youngest child. Unlike his father, who sometimes forgot the struggles of common people, Aremu walked through the village greeting farmers and traders warmly. He helped women carry heavy loads. He played with children in the dusty streets. And when he looked at Omotola, his eyes shone with pure love. Omotola felt the same way. She had known Aremu since they were young, running barefoot through the palace gardens together. Now they were grown, and their love had blossomed like hibiscus flowers in the rainy season. The entire kingdom celebrated their upcoming marriage. Drummers practiced wedding songs. Women sewed colorful oak fabrics. Children danced in anticipation. But in his dark compound, Babalawo Olokun watched everything with burning jealousy. His heart twisted with envy every time he saw them together. Omotola had always feared the priest. Even as a young girl, she sensed something wrong about him. His smile never reached his eyes. His compliments felt like spider webs, sticky and dangerous. One market day, when she was buying yam tubers, Babalawo Olokun appeared suddenly beside her. "You are more beautiful than the sunrise, Omotola," he whispered. She stepped back, clutching her basket tightly. "Thank you, Babalawo," she replied politely, trying to leave. But he blocked her path. His eyes followed her movements like a hawk watching prey. That evening, Omotola told her mother what happened. "Mama, his eyes follow me everywhere. I feel trapped when he looks at me." Her mother held her close. "Stay away from that man, my daughter." Some people carried darkness inside them. But staying away from Babalawo Olokun was impossible. He was everywhere, at festivals, ceremonies, naming ceremonies, and funerals. And each time, his gaze found Omotola, burning with something she didn't want to understand. The wedding date was announced throughout the kingdom. In 3 moons, Prince Aremu would marry Omotola. The palace servants cleaned every corner. The royal cooks prepared lists of meals. The king himself smiled more than usual. But Babalawo Olokun could not eat. He could not sleep. Jealousy consumed him like fire consuming dry grass. "She should be mine," he muttered alone in his shrine room, surrounded by carved wooden figures and smoking incense. "I am powerful. I speak to the gods. What does that prince have that I don't?" Night after night, he consulted his Ifa divination chain, asking the spirits for guidance. But the spirits remained silent, refusing to support his wicked desires. Then, one dark night, Babalawo Olokun decided he would take matters into his own hands. If the gods wouldn't help him, he would use forbidden magic, the kind that priestesses and elders warned against, the kind that destroyed souls and brought curses upon entire villages. The priest began planning carefully. He couldn't simply kill the prince. That would bring immediate suspicion. The king would demand justice, and even his spiritual authority couldn't protect him from royal anger. No, he needed something cleverer, something that would make the prince disappear completely while giving him a perfect excuse. He spent days mixing herbs, chanting ancient incantations, and preparing enchanted powders that smelled like rotting flowers. He called upon spirits that lived in the spaces between worlds, spirits that decent priests avoided. These spirits demanded payment, blood, offerings, and promises of future sacrifices. Babalawo Olokun agreed to everything. His obsession had made him reckless. Finally, the spell was ready. A small leather pouch filled with gray powder that shimmered strangely in candlelight. One sprinkle of this powder, combined with the right incantation, could trap a human soul inside wood, stone, or earth. The priest smiled wickedly. Tomorrow, he would visit the prince with a false prophecy. Early the next morning, Babalawo Olokun arrived at the palace gates carrying his divination tools. The guards, recognizing the priest, allowed him inside immediately. He found Prince Aremu in the royal courtyard, practicing sword movements. "My prince," Babalawo called out, bowing deeply. "The spirits sent me urgent visions last night. I must speak with you privately." Aremu stopped practicing and wiped sweat from his forehead. He trusted the priest completely. His father had relied on Babalawo Olokun for years, and the prince saw no reason to doubt him. What did the spirits reveal? Aremu asked. The priest's face became serious, almost frightened. "A hidden danger threatens your father's throne. Dark forces are gathering. Only you can prevent disaster, but you must act quickly and secretly." Aremu's heart raced. His father meant everything to him. "What must I do?" Babalawo Olokun leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Meet me at the edge of the dark forest tomorrow at dawn. Come alone. If anyone follows, the spirits will flee, and we'll lose our chance to stop the danger." That night, Aremu couldn't sleep. He thought about his father, about the kingdom, about the mysterious danger the priest mentioned. He wanted to tell Omotola, but Babalawo Olokun had warned him. This mission required absolute secrecy. When dawn broke, Aremu dressed in simple clothes to avoid attention. He told the palace guards he was going hunting alone and would return by midday. Then he walked through the quiet village toward the dark forest. The forest got its name honestly. Even during bright afternoons, shadows filled the spaces between ancient trees. Hunters avoided it. Children were forbidden to play near it. Stories said spirits lived there, spirits that confused travelers, making them walk in circles until they collapsed from exhaustion. As Aremu approached the forest edge, he saw Babalawo Olokun waiting, holding a staff carved with strange symbols. "You came alone." "Good," the priest said, smiling. But his smile was cold, nothing like the warm expressions Aremu was used to seeing. Something felt wrong, but the prince pushed the feeling aside. His father needed him. They walked deeper into the forest. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy above. Birds didn't sing here. Even insects seemed to avoid this place. The silence pressed against Aremu's ears. "How much further?" the prince asked, feeling increasingly uneasy. Babalawo Olokun stopped walking and turned around slowly. His expression had changed completely. The false concern was gone, replaced by something dark and triumphant. "We are here," the priest said quietly. Aremu looked around, confused. There was nothing here, just trees, shadows, and dead leaves covering the ground. "Where's the danger you spoke of?" The priest's mouth curved into a cruel smile. "The danger, my dear prince, is you." Before Aremu could react, before he could reach for the knife at his belt, Babalawo Olokun threw the enchanted powder into the air. Gray dust swirled around the prince like a small storm. The priest's voice rose, chanting words in a language older than the kingdom itself. Words that hurt to hear, that made the air feel thick and wrong. Aremu tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He tried to scream, but his voice disappeared into silence. Panic flooded his chest as he felt his body changing. His feet pushed deeper into the earth, roots spreading from his toes into the soil. His legs hardened, becoming rough like bark. His arms stretched upward against his will, fingers elongating into branches. His skin turned gray and rough, splitting into patterns like tree bark. His hair transformed into leaves that rustled despite there being no wind. The prince's eyes remained open, aware, watching helplessly as his humanity disappeared. Within moments, Prince Aremu was no longer human. He stood rooted to the forest floor, a young tree among countless others, alive but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to call for help. Only his consciousness remained trapped inside the wooden prison, screaming silently. Babalawo Olokun circled the tree slowly, examining his work with satisfaction. Now Omotola will be mine, he whispered to the tree, knowing the prince could still hear. Then he walked away, leaving Aremu alone in the cursed forest. Back in the village, Babalawo Olokun's performance was masterful. He rushed to the palace, his face twisted with false worry. The king received him immediately in the throne room. "Your Majesty," the priest said, breathing heavily as if he had been running. "Prince Aremu came to me with troubling visions. The gods have called him for spiritual cleansing. He must isolate himself for several weeks in prayer and fasting." The king frowned deeply. "Isolate? Where? When will he return?" The gods did not specify a timeline, but this is crucial for his destiny and for the kingdom's future. We must trust the divine process. Though confused and worried, the king trusted Babalawo Olokun. The priest had guided the kingdom through droughts, wars, and epidemics. Why would he lie now? "I will inform the palace," the king said sadly. Meanwhile, Omotola sensed something terribly wrong. When servants told her about Aremu's sudden spiritual retreat, her heart refused to believe it. Aremu would never leave without telling her. He would never abandon their wedding preparations without explanation. That night, she cried until dawn, feeling in her bones that something evil had happened to her beloved prince. Days passed slowly. The palace felt empty without Prince Aremu's laughter and kindness. The king grew increasingly worried, asking Babalawo Olokun daily for updates. The priest always gave the same answer: "The gods are still working. We must be patient." But Babalawo Olokun wasn't being patient. His plan was moving to its next phase. One morning, he requested an urgent meeting with the king. The king, hoping for news about his son, agreed immediately. The throne room was full of elders and advisors when the priest arrived. "Your Majesty, the gods have spoken to me with a new message," Babalawo Olokun announced, his voice carrying authority that made everyone listen. "What message?" the king asked eagerly. "The gods have chosen Omotola as my spiritual wife. This union will bring great blessing and protection to our kingdom." Silence fell like a heavy blanket. The elders exchanged shocked glances. Omotola's father, sitting among the council members, stood up angrily. "My daughter is engaged to Prince Aremu. This is madness." The priest's eyes flashed dangerously. "Would you question the will of the gods?" The king found himself trapped. In their culture, challenging a priest's divine message could bring curses upon the entire kingdom. But this felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. "Babalawo Olokun," the king said carefully, "perhaps we should wait until my son returns from his spiritual retreat." The priest shook his head firmly. "The gods' timing is not our timing. The wedding must happen within 7 days, or the protection they promised will be withdrawn." Fear rippled through the council. Recent harvests had been poor. Sickness had touched several families. Could they risk angering the gods? Omotola, hearing about the priest's announcement, ran to the palace immediately. She burst into her father's compound that evening, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, you cannot let this happen. I love Aremu. I will never marry that wicked man." Her father held her as she sobbed. "I know, my daughter, but the king is under enormous pressure. The elders are afraid." "Then I will run away," Omotola declared. "I will disappear into forest. I will die before I marry Babalawo Olokun." Throughout the village, people whispered their concerns. Everyone knew Omotola loved Prince Aremu. Everyone had seen the joy in their faces when they were together. This forced marriage to the priest felt like darkness swallowing light. But no one dared speak loudly against Babalawo Olokun. His power frightened them. His connection to spiritual forces made him untouchable. Mothers held their daughters closer. Fathers sharpened their farming tools nervously, unsure what they were preparing for. The wedding preparations began reluctantly. Instead of joy, fear filled the air. Instead of celebration, people moved through the arrangements like they were preparing for a funeral. Omotola refused to eat. She stayed in her room, praying desperately. "Aremu, wherever you are, please come back. Please save me from this nightmare." Deep in the dark forest, the tree that was Prince Aremu stood silently. But inside the wooden prison, his consciousness raged. He could hear birds landing on his branches. He could feel rain soaking into his bark. He was aware of everything but could do nothing. The helplessness was torture worse than any physical pain. The night before the wedding arrived like a storm cloud. In the village, preparations were complete despite everyone's misery. Babalawo Olokun's compound glowed with lanterns. Food had been prepared. Drummers had been hired, though they would play without enthusiasm. The priest himself sat in his shrine, speaking to the dark spirits he had summoned. "Tomorrow she will be mine," he said aloud, pouring palm wine onto the earth as offering. "Tomorrow my victory will be complete." But that same night, something unexpected happened in the dark forest. A young orphan boy named Teo entered the forest. Teo was only 12 years old, thin and ragged, surviving by hunting snails and gathering wild mushrooms to sell. He had been warned about the dark forest many times, but hunger made him brave. As he walked carefully between trees, searching for snails near the damp ground, he heard something strange. A whisper. It was so faint he thought he imagined it at first. Then it came again, a voice without words, a sound like wind but shaped differently. Teo froze, his small basket of snails forgotten. The whisper seemed to come from a young tree standing alone in a small clearing. As he approached cautiously, he noticed something unusual. The tree's bark had patterns that almost looked like a human face, eyes closed in anguish, mouth open in a silent scream. And from one section of the trunk, red sap dripped slowly, looking disturbingly like blood. Fear grabbed Teo's throat. This wasn't natural. This was dark magic. He had heard stories about cursed objects and trapped spirits, stories the elders told to scare children into good behavior. But those were just stories, weren't they? The whisper came again, stronger now, almost forming words. Teo couldn't understand a language, but he felt the desperation, the plea for help. Without thinking about danger, without considering consequences, the young boy ran. He ran faster than he had ever run before, crashing through bushes and leaping over roots, his heart pounding so loudly it drowned out all other sounds. Teo didn't stop running until he reached the compound of Baba Agbamala, a retired priest who lived at the opposite end of the village from Babalawo Olokun. Baba Agbamala was ancient, so old that nobody remembered his exact age. His beard was completely white and his eyes were cloudy, but those eyes had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He had retired from active priesthood years ago, disgusted by younger priests who used their powers for selfish purposes instead of serving the community. Teo pounded on the wooden gate desperately. Baba Agbamala, please help." The old man emerged slowly, leaning on a carved walking stick. "Child, why are you disturbing my peace at this hour?" "There's a tree in the dark forest," Teo gasped, trying to catch his breath. "It whispers. It bleeds. Something is trapped inside." Baba Agbamala's expression changed instantly. The cloudiness left his eyes, replaced by sharp intelligence and deep concern. "Show me," he commanded, his voice suddenly strong despite his age. Together, the old priest and the young boy returned to the dark forest. Baba Agbamala moved surprisingly quickly for someone so ancient, as if the urgency of the situation had given him new strength. When they reached the tree, Baba Agbamala circled it slowly, examining the bark, touching it gently, listening with more than just his ears. "This is powerful dark magic," he whispered. "A human soul has been trapped here by someone who knows forbidden rituals. Can you free them?" Teo asked hopefully. The old priest was silent for a long moment. "The magic is strong, but it is not complete. Whoever did this was powerful but rushed. They made small mistakes in their incantation. I can break the spell, but it will require all my remaining strength." Baba Agbamala began immediately. He drew symbols in the dirt around the tree, using his walking stick. He sang ancient songs in languages that predated the kingdom itself. He burned sacred herbs that filled the air with smoke so thick that Teo could barely see. Hours passed. The moon moved across the sky. Finally, as dawn approached, the tree began to shake violently. The bark split with sounds like bones cracking. Branches twisted and shortened. Roots withdrew from the earth. Teo watched in amazement and horror as the tree transformed, wood becoming flesh, leaves becoming hair, bark becoming skin. With a final gasp of released magic, Prince Aremu collapsed on the forest floor, no longer a tree, but human again. Naked, weak, covered in scratches and bark fragments, but alive. He lay gasping, unable to move, his body remembering what it meant to breathe, to pump blood, to exist as human. Baba Agbamala knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his forehead. "Rest, my prince. You are free now." Tears streamed down Aremu's face as he tried to speak. His throat was raw, his voice barely a whisper. How long was I? 3 weeks, Baba Agbamala replied sadly. "And there's something you must know immediately. Tomorrow is your wedding day, but not to Omotola. Babalawo Olokun has arranged to marry her himself." Rage and horror flooded through Aremu's exhausted body, giving him strength he shouldn't have had. "No!" he croaked, trying to stand but falling back down. I must stop him." "You will," Baba Agbamala said firmly. "But first, you must recover your strength. Teo, help me carry the prince to my compound." With the young boy supporting one side and the old priest supporting the other, they brought Aremu out of the dark forest. At Baba Agbamala's home, they washed him, dressed his wounds, fed him warm soup, and let him sleep for a few precious hours. When Aremu woke, the sun was already high in the sky. "The wedding," he gasped, sitting up too quickly. "It begins at sunset," Baba Agbamala said. "We have time, but not much." The old priest placed a small leather pouch around Aremu's neck. "This charm will protect you from Babalawo Olokun's magic. He cannot harm you while you wear it. But be careful, his power is still great, and cornered animals are the most dangerous." By afternoon, the entire village had gathered for the wedding ceremony. Despite their unhappiness, people came because refusing would have seemed like rejecting the God's will. The ceremony took place in the village square, decorated with palm fronds and white cloth. Drummers played slow, mournful rhythms. Babalawo Olokun stood at the center, dressed in elaborate beaded regalia that caught the sunlight. He looked proud, triumphant, completely confident in his victory. Omotola was brought forward by her parents, both crying silently. She wore a beautiful wedding outfit, but her face was a mask of despair. Her eyes were swollen from days of crying. She moved like someone walking to her own execution. The king sat on a special chair, looking old and defeated. He had tried everything to delay this wedding, but the priest's authority and the council's fear had overruled him. The ceremony began. The priest chanted blessings. Elders poured libations. Omotola stood still as a statue, her spirit already broken. Then the sky darkened suddenly. Thunder rumbled across the heavens, though there were no clouds. The wind picked up from nowhere, blowing so hard that palm fronds tore loose and tumbled across the square. People looked around nervously. Was this a sign from the gods? Then, at the edge of the gathering, a figure appeared. Prince Aremu walked slowly into the village square. He was barefoot, his clothes were simple, his hair was wild, and his skin still bore marks. From his transformation, patterns that looked like faint bark scars. But he stood tall, his eyes blazing with determination and righteous anger. Gasps rippled to the crowd like waves across water. Women screamed. Men jumped to their feet. The drummers stopped playing mid-beat. "Impossible," Babalawo Olokun whispered, his face draining of color. You should be." Omotola's scream cut through everything else. "Aremu." She lifted her wedding dress and ran toward him, tears of joy replacing tears of despair. She crashed into his arms, sobbing against his chest. "You're alive. You're here. I prayed for you every single night." Aremu held her tightly, breathing in her scent, feeling her warmth, confirming she was real. "I'm here, my love, and I know the truth about everything." He turned to face the crowd, still holding Omotola's hand. His voice rang out clearly, reaching every corner of the square. "People of Ile-Oluji, I was not on a spiritual retreat. I was cursed by the very man who stands before you, the man who claims to serve the gods, but serves only his own wicked desires." Aremu raised his free hand, showing the charm Baba Agbamala had given him. "Babalawo Olokun lured me into the dark forest with lies. He used forbidden magic to trap my soul inside a tree. He left me there to suffer while he stole my bride and my life." The crowd turned to stare at the priest, shock and anger rising like heat from the ground. Babalawo Olokun's eyes darted around desperately, searching for escape routes. "Lies!" he shouted. "The prince has been touched by evil spirits. He doesn't know what he's saying." But Baba Agbamala stepped forward from the crowd, supporting himself on his walking stick. "I freed the prince myself," the old priest declared. "I saw the curse. I felt the dark magic. And I recognized the signature of forbidden rituals that only one person in this village knows." Babalawo Olokun stumbled backward. His confident mask crumbled completely, revealing the fear underneath. He began muttering incantations, reaching into his pouch for defensive magic. But the protective charm around Aremu's neck glowed faintly, and the priest's spells failed. Nothing happened. His power had abandoned him. The king rose from his chair, his face transformed by fury. This was no longer the worried father or uncertain ruler. This was a king who had been betrayed by someone he trusted completely. "Guards!" he commanded, his voice like thunder. "Seize Babalawo Olokun immediately." The royal guards moved quickly, grabbing the priest's arms and forcing him to his knees. The priest struggled, screaming curses and threats. But without his magic, he was just an old man with evil intentions. The crowd pressed closer, their fear replaced by righteous anger. "He tried to force my daughter into marriage. He cursed our prince. How many others has he harmed with his wicked magic?" The king raised his hand for silence. When the crowd quieted, he spoke with cold finality. "Babalawo Olokun, you are accused of using dark magic against the royal family, of conspiracy, of attempting to corrupt the gods' true will with your selfish desires." The trial happened immediately, right there in the village square. Elders questioned the priest. Baba Agbamala testified about the curse. Young Teo told his story of finding the bleeding tree. Evidence mounted like stones building a wall. Through it all, Babalawo Olokun remained silent, knowing that any words would only deepen his guilt. Finally, the king pronounced judgment. "Your powers are stripped from you. Your titles are removed. You will be exiled from this kingdom forever, sent to wander without home, without honor, without the respect you betrayed." 2 guards dragged the former priest away. He left the village that very evening, carrying only a small bag, heading toward the setting sun. People watched him go silently, and no one felt pity. The square erupted in celebration afterward. What had started as a forced wedding transformed into an impromptu festival of joy. Real drummers arrived and played with enthusiasm. Women danced. Children laughed. The king embraced his son, tears flowing freely down the old man's face. "I thought I had lost you forever," he whispered. Aremu held his father tight. "I'm home now, father. Everything is right again." 3 weeks later, the wedding that should have happened took place. This time, joy filled every moment. Omotola wore the same beautiful outfit, but her face glowed with happiness instead of despair. Prince Aremu stood beside her, strong and healthy, the bark scars on his skin already beginning to fade. The entire kingdom celebrated. Music played from dawn until long after sunset. Feasts covered every available surface. Children danced until they collapsed from exhaustion, then got up and danced more. During the ceremony, Baba Agbamala blessed the couple with prayers of protection and long life. Young Teo was honored publicly and given a place in the palace as the prince's personal attendant. His life of poverty ended by his brave actions. As the sun set on the wedding day, Aremu and Omotola stood together, watching their people celebrate. "I thought I had lost you forever," Omotola whispered. Aremu squeezed her hand gently. "Dark magic tried to separate us, but love and truth were stronger. They always are." And in the years that followed, the story of the wicked Ifa priest became a cautionary tale told throughout the land, a reminder that power without goodness is poison, that jealousy destroys the person who holds it, and that true love, protected by faith and courage, cannot be defeated by any curse. The kingdom of Ile-Oluji prospered under Prince Aremu's eventual reign, and Omotola became the most beloved queen in their history. And whenever children asked about the faint scars on the king's arms that looked like tree bark, he would smile and say, "That is a story about surviving darkness and choosing light." And it begins like this. Long ago, there was a wicked priest who learned too late that evil always destroys itself.